What if mercy was the deadliest mistake you could make? Hold tight. John Jensen's moment of compassion ignited a war that burned his world to ash. Would you pull the trigger if it meant saving your family? Or would you hunt every last one? And what if the man you spared sold you out for a pair of boots, vengeance or justice? Comment below. Stick around, we're breaking down the bloodiest showdown in the West. Betrayal, flaming coffins, and a gang leader who loved playing God. You'll never trust a quiet town again. Smash like if you'd ride with John, subscribe for more, and tell us, who deserved to die first? De La Rue, the mayor, or the traitor in the crowd? John Jensen sat in tense silence as the man handed a wine bottle to his wife, testing him, daring him to react. John knew exactly what was happening. The man wanted to see if he had the courage to stop him. But when John hesitated, the man's audacity grew. It started with cruel words, each one meant to strip John of his pride. Then, as if words weren't enough, the man slid his hand into John's wife's dress. John clenched his fists, fighting to stay calm, pleading for reason. But reason had no place here. With a smirk, the man drew a black revolver and aimed it at John's head. Paralyzed, John could do nothing as his wife was taken from him, humiliated before his eyes. His heart pounded, but with his son there, he couldn't afford a reckless move. One wrong step, and he could lose everything. But even a hardened man like John Jensen had his limits. In their Danish hometown dialect, he whispered to his wife. She understood immediately, biting down on the man's ear in a desperate struggle. The distraction was enough. John lunged. The fight was brutal but quick. John knocked the gun to the ground and took control. But instead of ending it then and there, he hesitated, choosing mercy over bloodshed. He told his son to grab the gun, thinking they could turn things around without killing. It was a mistake he would regret forever. In that split second, his son unknowingly blocked John's line of fire. The thug seized his chance, grabbing the boy and pressing a knife to his throat. The advantage was gone. Get out, the thug ordered, giving John 5 seconds. Even a battle-hardened man like him felt his resolve waver. His vision blurred with unshed tears as he realized he had no choice. With a heavy heart, he stepped onto the dirt road, watching helplessly as the carriage sped away. Desperation took over. John ran. He knew he couldn't catch a horse, but he didn't stop. His wife, his son, he couldn't abandon them. Then, in the distance, he saw a body. His blood ran cold. He stumbled forward, heart pounding. It was his son, the child he had only just met. Gone. Grief threatened to consume him, but there was no time to mourn. He lifted his son's lifeless body and pressed forward. Up ahead, the carriage stood abandoned, its driver discarded like trash. Then he heard it, his wife's screams piercing the night. John inhaled sharply, forcing down his pain. He laid his son down gently, whispering a silent promise. Then, his eyes locked onto the gun beside the dead coachman. He picked it up, checked the chamber, and took a slow, steady breath. It was time to finish this. John Jensen crouched in the shadows, gripping his gun as he spotted a thug standing guard by the carriage. Without hesitation, he fired at the lantern. Glass shattered, plunging the area into darkness. The horses panicked. The startled thug leaned out to investigate. John's bullet hit him between the eyes. He dropped instantly. Inside the carriage, the second thug scrambled, yanking up his pants before bolting for the woods. John raised his gun, steady and unrelenting. Another shot. Another body fell. The last thug, now stripped of his arrogance, threw up his hands. Please, don't kill me, he begged, voice shaking. But John wasn't listening. Grief and rage consumed him. He kept firing until the gun clicked empty. Then, silence. John turned toward the carriage, and his heart shattered. For 10 years, he had fought to build a better life, working alone in America until he finally had something. Land, a home, a future. This was supposed to be a reunion. Instead, it was a massacre. His moment of mercy had cost him everything. And the nightmare wasn't over. The thug he had just killed had an older brother, Henry De La Rue, a ruthless gang leader. And Henry wanted revenge. When he couldn't find his brother's killer, he took it out on the town. Storming into the mayor's office, he laid down his law, hand over 2 people to be executed, or he'd take 4 himself. Terrified, the mayor and sheriff made a choice. The town's oldest woman was the first sacrifice. Her grandson protested, but his cries meant nothing. She was executed before his eyes. Then came the second victim, a legless farmer, dragged from his home. The town hoped this would satisfy De La Rue. It didn't. With chilling indifference, De La Rue pulled out his gun and shot another man at random. An old woman and half a man? He scoffed. That only counts as one. Then, as if slaughtering innocent people wasn't enough, he doubled the town's protection fee, from $80 to $160 a month, until the killer was found. But his real goal wasn't vengeance. It was power. Oil had been discovered nearby, and the capitalists who wanted it had hired De La Rue to make the townspeople desperate enough to sell. Meanwhile, Peter Jensen was on his way to John's home, unaware of the nightmare that had unfolded. They had plans to meet for dinner, but something felt wrong. As he approached, he saw the front door hanging open. Gun drawn, he stepped inside, and then he saw them. 2 lifeless bodies. His stomach dropped as the truth hit him. Peter didn't say much. He didn't have to. Men like him and John didn't need words to share pain. He simply stood by his friend. And finally, after everything, John let his walls down. The weight of his grief came crashing in, and for the first time, he wept. With Peter's help, he buried his wife and son, laying to rest the family he had fought so hard to protect. And as the last handful of dirt settled over their graves, John Jensen knew one thing for certain: this wasn't over. John Jensen had no idea that, not far away, another funeral was taking place. The widow of the man he had killed was in mourning. Henry de la Rue stood beside her, his expression dark with fury. He swore to find his brother's killer and promised to take care of his sister-in-law. But Madeline barely acknowledged him. She knew his words were empty. His concern wasn't about family but his own twisted desires. With a cold glance, she silenced him before he could say more. Meanwhile, John and Peter Jensen rode into town, burdened by regret. There was nothing left for them here, nothing to salvage. Their only choice was to sell their land and leave this place behind. But fate had other plans. As John arrived in town, a couple recognized him. They had been on the same carriage the day the thugs threw him out, sitting just across from his wife and son. Hoping to avoid paying de la Rue's newly raised protection fee, the woman slipped away and ran to the police station. Unaware of the betrayal, John met with the mayor to sell his land. But the offer was a gut punch, barely half of what it was worth. That's when the truth hit him. The thug he killed was Henry de la Rue's brother. In retaliation, de la Rue had doubled the town's protection fees, leaving them broke. John hesitated, but with no other choice, he signed. The mayor, in a rare moment of sympathy, muttered a warning: "Hide your money in your boot." Stepping outside, John sensed something was off. The street was dead silent, doors shut, curtains drawn. At the far end, 3 armed men walked with purpose. He told himself it was just a coincidence, until he mounted his horse and saw more figures closing in, blocking every escape. This was a setup. John turned sharply, galloping toward an alley, straight into an ambush. A gunshot rang out. His horse reared and collapsed beneath him. Pain shot through his body as he hit the ground. The sheriff stepped forward, gun still smoking. John was out of options. Moments later, he was shackled and dragged to the police station. Not long after, they threw Peter into the cell, bruised and bloodied. Then John saw the detective's face, and everything clicked. This wasn't just an arrest. It was personal. John took a deep breath. "I killed him," he admitted. "Peter had nothing to do with it. Let him go." The sheriff didn't even look up. Assaulting an officer is a crime too. He stays. The next morning, de la Rue's men arrived. No one stopped them. No one even spoke. Under the town's silent gaze, they tied John's hands and feet and led him away. Some couldn't bear to watch. Madeline turned and left. The woman who betrayed him lowered her head in shame. But the rest? They just stood there, afraid. John was dragged back to the outlaw camp, where 2 familiar faces waited: Henry de la Rue and Madeline, the widow of the man John had killed. John knew de la Rue's cruelty, but he refused to let his wife and son's memory be disgraced. Clenching his jaw, he relived the nightmare, recounting everything that led him here. Madeline listened in silence. She had always known what kind of man her husband was. John's words only confirmed it. Without a word, she turned and walked away, refusing to demand his execution. De la Rue, more obsessed with her than revenge, let John live. For now, the sun burned overhead, turning the camp into a furnace. Still bound, John barely had time to react when the mayor appeared. His first words made John's blood run cold. "Can I have his boots?" Only the mayor knew John had hidden his land sale money inside them. Back in town, church bells called the townspeople to prayer. With the sheriff gone, only the deputy remained to guard Peter Jensen. Bruised from Peter's earlier resistance, the deputy sat alone, enduring his prisoner's relentless taunts. He knew it was a setup, but anger simmered beneath his skin. Meanwhile, in the dim glow of an oil lamp, Henry de la Rue whispered sweet promises to Madeline. He thought he had won her over, believing she was his, but he had no idea an intruder had already slipped into the camp. A patrolling guard noticed something strange. The oil lamp at the watchpost swayed slightly, yet the guard was missing. Suspicious, he drew his weapon and crept forward. By the time he found the body, it was too late. Peter Jensen moved fast. Slipping into John's tent, he cut his bindings and hauled him to safety before the next patrol arrived. When the guards returned, Peter was ready. He took them out swiftly. By the time de la Rue realized what was happening, Peter and John were already galloping into the stormy night. But de la Rue never let defiance go unanswered. No one escaped him. As Peter rode hard through the darkness, John, still unconscious, kept slipping from the saddle. Peter knew they wouldn't last like this. With no choice, he veered off the path, found a pile of boulders, and hid John beneath them before leading the pursuers away. By morning, John woke to the scorching sun and unbearable thirst. He knelt by a shallow puddle and drank greedily, ignoring the grit in the water. Then he heard it, the steady rhythm of approaching hooves. Heart pounding, he grabbed his gun and ducked behind the rocks. As the riders passed, he risked a glance. What he saw shattered him. Peter Jensen, bound at the feet, was being dragged behind a horse, his lifeless body bouncing over the dirt road. Less than 4 days ago, John had lost his family. Now, he had lost his best friend. Grief turned to rage. No more running. No more hiding. John Jensen was going to make them pay. And as he turned back toward the camp, Henry de la Rue's reckoning was near. De la Rue's men hit fast. His guards were shot, and his safe was emptied. Only Madeline knew the combination. And as the train pulled away, she thought she was finally free. Her relief didn't last long. The outlaws caught up, forcing the train to a halt. Desperate, she ran while loading her gun, trying to secure one last chance for herself. But someone was already waiting. She didn't make it far before being dragged back to the camp. Despite his obsession with her, Henry de la Rue feared she might kill him one day. A man nearby sneered that it would be a shame to waste such a beautiful body. To appease his men, de la Rue reluctantly decided to give her to them. Meanwhile, John Jensen woke up in a stranger's home, a farm woman whose husband had been murdered by de la Rue. After a day of rest, he tracked down the mayor. John had no intention of sparing him. After all, everyone called the gang leader de la Rue, but the mayor? He called him Henry. It meant only one thing, a secret between them. John forced the mayor to open a coffin and step inside. When he refused, John beat him until he confessed. He had helped Henry de la Rue steal land. Ignoring his pleas, John sealed the coffin shut. After retrieving his boots and his hidden money, John visited the local grocery store to stock up on weapons. The quantity alone told Wojciech Borowski what was coming. He had his own score to settle with de la Rue, so he joined John's fight. By sunrise, de la Rue received a coffin at his camp, with the mayor's body inside. It was John Jensen's challenge. But before he could react, flames erupted at the entrance. Borowski's doing. His job was to create a distraction while John set the barn on fire. Once John was in position, Borowski was supposed to escape. Instead, he climbed higher with a can of kerosene. He got one shot off before the gang heard him. A hail of bullets tore through him, but as he fell, he spilled the kerosene right onto the thug who fired. One flick of a cigarette, and the man went up in flames, igniting the last standing building. John had already made his move. He took down a thug near the horses, then spotted another holding Madeline hostage. Without hesitation, he shot the man in the head, but his position was exposed. A gunman fired through the wall, hitting John in the leg. Thinking he had John cornered, the thug grabbed John's rifle from under the floorboards. That was a mistake. John had already moved. From the shadows, he took the man down with a knife. Then, Henry de la Rue stepped forward. He admired the man who had single-handedly wiped out his gang. But admiration wouldn't save John. De la Rue raised his gun. A shot rang out. It was Madeline. The woman he had kept as his possession was the one who betrayed him. John didn't hesitate. He pulled his pistol and finished the job. By the time the sheriff arrived, it was over. He wanted to take credit for the victory, and take Madeline, too. But John and Madeline stood together. The sheriff, recognizing John had done what he never could, backed off. With nothing left for them here, John and Madeline left together, heading toward a future they could finally call their own. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, subscribe for more, and we'll see you next time.